just a second. If you haven't already, find your chat feature and let us know who you are, your name, what your role is, whether you're a teacher, administrator, work in the central office, what your school, district, or organization is, and a little bit about why the topic is interesting to you. Why do you want to talk about specially designed instruction? Great. Welcome, Marcy. Welcome, Sherry.
Hi, Michelle. Awesome. Well, we are going to go ahead and get started just to give a reminder of some of our Zoom accessibility features. There is an option for closed captioning. We also are recording this webinar today, and so this will be sent out and shared with you all after the session. And so if we can do anything to make your experience better, we'd love to. So any feedback you have would be great, but we're going to dig in. So just to get us started, my name is Rachel Burley. I'm a program director with the Ability Challenge. I spend a lot of my time partnering with school leaders and special education teams to strengthen their systems specifically around specially designed instruction and inclusive practices for all students. I'm based in Nashville. I started my career in education as a high school special education teacher. Have had a variety of leadership roles, dean of students, an instructional dean, a director of special education, so kind of the whole gamut in K-12. And now I get to work with Krista. Krista, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Krista Reed. I'm also a program director at the Ability Challenge. My background is also as a special ed teacher, mostly in New Orleans and charter schools and public schools. And then I transitioned to being a building level special ed leader and then a special ed leader in a small network. But since then, I've also been working with school districts around the country on a lot of what you all are talking about in the chat, right? Like wanting to see, working with folks who want to see their districts become more inclusive, to change their service delivery models, and knowing that, teachers have a lot of training needs related to that, if that's going to happen well. So that's what I've been doing. And I'm really excited to talk about this topic today because I agree with most people in the chat. Like, this is something that needs to get explained and demystified for not just special ed teachers, but gen ed teachers as well, in order for classrooms and schools to be truly inclusive.
Awesome. So as I mentioned, we work with an organization called the Ability Challenge, and our goal is to partner with schools, districts, and networks to help leaders and teachers build authentically inclusive school communities that meet the needs of all students. So our framework is here on the left side of the screen. It's called the Thrive Framework. And these are kind of the evidence-based roadmap for the knowledge, mindsets, and practices that are required of leaders and educators to create those optimal conditions for diverse learners. And so today we're going to be digging in a little bit with this pink element of instruction and talking about how we can provide our best instruction to our diverse learners. So as we dig into SDI, we're going to start with the little chat waterfall, okay? So to yourself, I want us to start by hearing from you. So in the chat, you're going to drop one word that comes to mind when you think about implementing specially designed instruction. So just one word, and I will say go. And give you some time to type. So drop your word when you think about implementing specially designed instruction in 3, 2, 1, go. Boop, 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 boop. All right, we've got individualization, creativity, adjusting, adjustments, challenging. I love these words. Well, yeah, I love these words. Individual. Awesome. Yeah, so there are a variety of words one might think of. I'm excited to see, based on our session today, if your word changes at the end of the session, or if you learned something new. We sure hope so. And so, moving us forward, this is what we're going to be doing today. We're going to start by defining SDI, grounding it in what IDEA actually requires us to do instructionally for our students with disabilities. Then we'll move into implementation. What does this look like in real classrooms, not just on paper? We're going to have a small scenario practice, and then we'll have time for some question and answers and a little survey at the end. All right, so to kick us off, we're going to start with the actual legal definition of SDI, which is grounded in IDEA. So, specially designed instruction means adapting the content, the methodology, or the delivery of instruction to address the unique needs that result from a student's disability. So, two parts of this are really important. First, instruction must address the needs that result from the disability. That means we're not responding to general gaps, we're responding to how a disability impacts learning. Second, SDI exists to ensure access to the general curriculum. So, we're not talking about a separate curriculum or a watered down curriculum, we're talking about access to the general curriculum. So when we think about SDI, we're not thinking about extra help or accommodations. We're thinking about how can we intentionally adapt our instruction so that a student with a disability can meaningfully engage in grade level learning. So when you see this definition on the slide, I love if you drop in the chat what words in the definition feel most important to you or are resonating the most with you right now. Adapting, unique needs, access. These are all great. Love. And so, as I mentioned today, we're talking specifically about the planning piece and the implementation piece. And so, we're hoping that you are able to walk away with some really great strategies and things to try with your students from this session. Getting a little bit deeper into the definition of SDI, I wanted to share this purpose, and we kind of got this through the definition, but the purpose of SDI is to ensure that students with disabilities can access the general education curriculum, make meaningful progress, and meet the same academic standards as their non-disabled peers. So notice what this doesn't say. This doesn't say that students feel included. It doesn't say that they're present. It doesn't say any of that. It says access, progress, meet standards. So that means our goal is not just participation, it's real learning. So when we evaluate instruction in classrooms, we should be asking, is the student in the room or is the student actually engaged in a way that allows them to meet grade level expectations? All right, and so we shared this kind of quick checklist in our last session, but if something is truly SDI, it should be these things. First, it should describe what teachers will intentionally do or provide to remove a barrier to learning. Second, it addresses how the student's disability impacts access or progress in the general education curriculum. If you can't connect it to the disability impact, it's probably not SDI. Third, it increases access to or progress in the general education curriculum. Fourth, it has a valid research or evidence base. That means we're selecting approaches that have demonstrated effectiveness. And finally, we're pre-planned and continuously evaluating our SDI. So we're not being reactive. We are monitoring it to see if it's working and then making changes as needed.
I think this matches a lot of the words that we saw in the chat earlier, right? The idea that this is about the adjustments that I saw the word adjustment come up a lot, right? This is about what a teacher is adjusting about their instruction, not just things that we give kids. Here's a calculator, here's a graphic organizer, right? Like throwing tools at kids is not necessarily adjusting the content or the methodology of our teaching. It's just saying, here, see if this helps you, right? Which is not the point of providing greater access and ultimately growth for students. Those are accommodations. I think someone earlier, maybe it was, I'm trying to scroll back, Nicole saying like really trying to help teachers understand the difference between giving a student an accommodation and giving them the instruction that allows them to know when they need that accommodation and when to grab a tool and when to use it, that metacognitive lift that kids need to go through, like that is the point of SDI.
So now that we've defined SDI, we're going to zoom in a little bit to the three core components. So SDI lives in one or more of these areas through the content, the methodology, or the delivery of instruction. So content is what students are expected to learn. It's the grade level standards, the skills, the academic expectations. Methodology is how instruction happens. So the approaches, the strategies, techniques, sequencing that we use to teach. And delivery is the conditions under which instruction is provided. So that means changes to potentially group size, pacing, setting, frequency, format. It's how instruction is structured to meet disability-related needs. Here are a couple examples about how SDI might look across these three components. So under content, SEI might include teaching prerequisite skills, providing advanced content when appropriate, prioritizing key standards, teaching social, emotional, or daily living skills for those that might need it. Under methodology, we're talking about specific instructional approaches, explicit strategies, intentional sequencing, frequent checks for understanding potentially, how we're adjusting assessments. And then under delivery, we're talking about adjustments to group size, location, personnel support, maybe media or format. So these components often work together in many cases, and effective SEI includes thoughtful alignment across the three. And so we'll probably reiterate this again, but SEI does not have to meet all three at one time. It could just be one or two or three, but just one is still included in thinking through what is SDI.
I'm realizing also I forgot to add one to the delivery column, time of day, because a couple of the examples we're going to talk through are like changing when instruction happens might be really a vital adjustment for some students. So the timing or the scheduling of activities of when learning happens is another content or another adaptation area.
Awesome. All right, and so here we just wanted to share some questions that you might ask yourself as you're thinking through considerations for planning for SDI. So I'll give you all a minute to review this slide and then I'll voice over a few.
And if I am coaching or supporting special ed teachers or general ed teachers, right? Let's say we're sitting down in a planning meeting. These are the questions that I might need to, as a coach, be helping my teachers answer. Okay, let's think through. Is there anything that this child needs to be taught that's not already going to be covered in the general ed curriculum? Let's just start there. Identify the content adaptations we need to make first. So if you are like, take a screenshot of this slide. If you're in that position where you're talking to teachers about this and you're responsible for helping them understand more concretely what SDI is and is not, this is a great slide to start with.
Yep. So for content, we may ask, what does this child need to learn that's not already part of the general curriculum? What foundational or disability-related skills are impacting access? For methodology, which instructional approach is most successful for this student? What techniques are necessary because of the disability? What's been tried and what data do we have that has told us what works well for this student? For delivery, when, where, and by whom should instruction be delivered to maximize learning? What's the right group size? How often? For how long? These questions help get more granular when we think about our planning for SDI. So I want to hear a little bit from you all. Which component of SDI feels the most familiar in your current setting? Is it content adaptations? Is it methodology adaptations, delivery adaptations? So go ahead and use the poll feature. And as you vote, think about this. Are we most comfortable adjusting instruction where it happens, when it happens, how it happens? And I'm excited to see these results.
Well, I'm kind of surprised actually that the delivery adaptations, I guess I'm not. I'm going to be interested. I'm going to hear from people in the chat that are saying that delivery adaptations are the most familiar.
Are you going to publish the poll?
I am. I'm sorry. I'm going to let people vote. There's a couple, I think there's a few people, but I'm already seeing a lot
All
of
right,
things saying
no
delivery.
spoilers, no spoilers.
I'm just shocked. Probably shouldn't be. All right, I'm going to end the poll. I want you guys to see what I'm seeing. It's a lot of delivery adaptations. And I'm curious, what are you all seeing? Like, what are you seeing? Why do you think this is? Why is this the most sort of familiar to you in your setting?
Feel free to use the chat.
Yeah, use the chat. Tell us what you're seeing.
Or if you really want to chat, come off mute.
Mm.
Mm.
Those are quick decisions to make, quick and easier decisions. We can change group size pretty easily. Confusion about the difference between intervention and SDI, so delivery is the most concrete. Ellen, towards the end, if we haven't talked enough about the difference between intervention and SDI, let us know. I feel like I see teachers often skipping over the first two and considering only the delivery aspect. Okay. I'm wondering, I think also those are some of the first accommodations that folks tend to make is like, okay, are they going to get small group testing or are they not? Are they going to get pulled in a small group for that intervention or for that pull-out instruction that happens for phonics, whatever it might be? We have the least control over delivery, the length of class, time of day. Okay, so it's the one place maybe we can exercise some control. If we say like, okay, we're gonna do that in a small group. Um, I think it's also the most tied to services, right? To people, right? Like when this child is getting special ed instruction from a special educator, they're doing it often maybe limited in pull out, right? So we're doing it in a separate place with a separate group of students. So the connections between the other parts of the IEP are maybe the most direct. Interesting. Okay. This has come up at the end of our last webinar, and then I know folks said like part of the reason I'm on this call today is because I'm always trying to explain to people the difference between SDI and differentiation, or I myself want to get clearer on the answer to this. So let's talk through this, right? Differentiation and SDI are both important. But they serve different purposes and they impact students with disabilities differently. So let's start with differentiation, right? Differentiation is something that every teacher does or should do for any student. It's about responding to the natural variability in any classroom, right? There is no average student in any classroom. We know all students are different. They might have different readiness needs, different interests, they have different learner profiles, different constellations of strengths and weaknesses. So it's about adjusting the content, so to a certain degree, the process or the product in a lesson based on any of those characteristics of a learner's profile. So, when we're giving sentence starters to some kids, or we're giving graphic organizers to some kids or the whole class, right? Offering choice. Those are ways that we could be differentiating within a lesson based on the fact that we know like there are no two kids in this classroom that are the same. SDI takes that understanding a step further and is specifically about making those adjustments for students based on those disability related needs. It's not just a random element about the student's profile. It is about inherently the barriers presented by their disability. So it's intentional and individualized in a way that is more discrete and specific than differentiation. I told someone last time, I think differentiation you kind of think of as a more like an like a bigger term, and then within differentiation there is SDI that is much more specific. It is a type of differentiation that is specific and legally mandated, right, by IDEA for students with disabilities. So the key thing to remember is differentiation should live in general education planning all of the time, while SDI lives in the intersection between special education and general education, right? Students are entitled to SDI by virtue of having an IEP. So to summarize, SDI is individualized, it's intentional, which are words that you all put in the chat already, and it is a proactive way that we think about students' disability-related needs in order to adapt the instruction that they're receiving. It's focused on the individual, it's intentional, and it matches a need that we know stems from the student's disability. It goes beyond accommodations, it goes beyond differentiation, and it changes one of those three things we talked about earlier: content, methodology, or delivery, the what and how we teach to make a difference. Now, this type of insight into what a student needs is only possible because that student has had an evaluation, right? We've written an IEP and we more deeply understand them as a learner with specific needs that stem from a disability. We can't provide that in absence of identifying them as a student with a disability. So now we've talked a little bit about what SDI is, also a lot about what it's not. And so, like, how do we implement it? How do we make this come to life in a classroom? When we think about a process for integrating SDI into classroom instruction, we have to be able to do really three things. One, understand how that disability is impacting the student. Think about it. Think about those needs in the context of a lesson, a unit, or a lesson, right? And anticipate the ways in which those needs are going to come up. We're anticipating barriers to learning and thinking about what types of adaptations will remove those barriers. So that's the purple is understand the disability, anticipate the barriers in the lesson or unit context, and then integrate those into our lesson proactively. And here's why it matters, right? When we think about students with disabilities, number one, 15% of students are served under IDEA nationally. So almost 1 in 5 students. And then if we add in students who don't yet have one or in the process of evaluation, and in certain schools, it might be more than this. This is just a national average. And 67% of those students are included in a general ed classroom for most of the day. More people than ever need to know what SDI is and be able to do this process of identifying student needs based on their disability, because more people than ever are educating students with disabilities. We have a pyramid here that just kind of shows us the most to least common disability categories that teachers are working with in schools. In order to be able to anticipate those barriers, educators need a working understanding of these disabilities, right? So at minimum, a general educator needs to know, like, what are the needs of a student with a specific learning disability in basic reading? They need to understand what a health impairment might do for a student. And we hear this from teachers a lot. There was a report, and now I'm going to blank on what year it was, but fairly recently, in the last couple of years, there was a joint report between the National Center of Learning Disabilities and understood.org. And they found that 1 in 5 general educators reported feeling very well prepared to teach students with mild to moderate learning disabilities. So ADHD, dyslexia, right? They gave a survey and only 1 in 5 people said, yeah, I feel very well prepared. Most people said, I don't feel prepared at all. In general, teachers feel ill-equipped to meet the needs of millions of kids in our country. 1 in 5, or yeah, 1 in 5 students almost in their classroom. So the quote on the side here, I think, really highlights the issue. In effect, almost every state has failed to bring their licensure and certification standards in line with the new reality that every general ed teacher will surely have students with high incidence disabilities in their classroom. And they're telling us that. So I'm really curious right now. I'm going to put a poll up, and I'll wait to react to the results this time. I want to see, does this match your lived reality, right? Do you see that teachers feel unprepared? Do you see folks feeling a little bit more like some teachers are feeling more prepared? Or is anyone out there experiencing the opposite and saying, no, most of my teachers feel prepared. They just don't know what to do.
So just to clarify, the first option, yes, is yes, they feel unprepared. And then the last option, no, is they are
They are
prepared.
prepared. Does anyone have a bunch of teachers saying they feel really well prepared to teach students with disabilities? And if so, where do you work? I want to come there. What state are you in? Okay. All right, I'm gonna end the poll and I'm going to show you what most people said. Pretty evenly split, but more to the side of teachers. Most of your teachers would say they feel unprepared to teach students with disabilities. Okay. All right. So we've got some accurate reporting coming out of that report. At least it matches our lived experience. So how do we help? How do we change that, right? How do we help educators develop more awareness and confidence in addressing the needs of their students? So giving them a clear, replicable process, like the one that we outline on the screen, it looks simple, and we're probably oversimplifying it a little bit, but letting educators develop routines and systems to help them demystify right? How disability shows up for students, and then make concrete plans to address them in their instruction, builds that teacher efficacy and lets them know that this is not something that only a specialist can do with students, right? And that would be impossible because students spend the majority of their time in general education classrooms. So this is going to have to integrate its way into where students spend time. They cannot only receive SDI in some special place with a special person for 15 to 45 minutes a day. It's just not going to change outcomes for students. So we're going to use this process throughout the rest of our conversation today for the first step, for understanding disability, right? One thing that I think we don't see happening enough is having that IEP feel like a living document that we're coming back to. So helping teachers consistently review students' IEPs to identify the goals, the accommodations, their present levels of performance, the statements that we've made in that IEP about how the student's disability is impacting their learning, right? Helps them better know the student, helps them understand their strengths and understand how their access to the curriculum is currently being impeded by the effects of their disability. And then we're going to have to help them take that and adapt those content, methodology, and delivery aspects to ensure that they're addressing those needs. So we said an IEP is a great place to start, right? In order to understand that, IEP, great place. Another place that honestly educators are not spending a lot of time is in that student's individual evaluation report. Now, I'm not saying general educators need to read cover to cover a kid's individual eval, but coming back to that occasionally, or having a special educator have some key pages or paragraphs or sentences from the individual eval report at the ready when we're doing planning at the unit level or the lesson level can be really, really helpful to ground us in what are the student's disability related needs? How will this unit how will the student experience this unit given what their learning needs are? And again, those IEP goals often have, again, more clues in, especially the present levels of performance, into how the student is experiencing having a learning disability in that content area. So starting with those as sources to better understand the student's disability is a place that all educators can definitely brush up on to make the process better. Another thing that has helped in schools is really giving all educators some training on understanding learning disabilities just broadly, disability categories broadly. So, telling teachers, hey, we're going to look at our top 5 disability categories at the start of the year to better understand what it's like for a student with a specific learning disability, with a health impairment, with autism, right? If those are your most prevalent disability categories. So let's do that here together, right? Let's talk about what it means to have a specific learning disability, SLD, right? So when students have a specific learning disability, the IDEA says that this means that they have a, quote, disorder in one or more basic psychological processes involved in understanding or using language, spoken or written. And you'll see that when we break these down. Basic reading disabilities are when students have difficulty decoding or recognizing words accurately or efficiently. So they might struggle to decode or sound out words accurately or at an appropriate rate. They're really slow at doing that word solving. Students with reading fluency disabilities have trouble reading text with enough accuracy, speed, and expression to understand what they read. This means they often read slowly, even though they're accurate, or they might read with a good pace, but frequent errors. So they're rarely monitoring and understanding what they read, even if they're accurate at sounding out at the word level. And then finally, there's a reading comprehension disability, which is where you don't have those issues with accuracy or fluency, but you still have struggle understanding what you read. And these kids are really struggling to learn from reading. Students can also have disabilities in listening comprehension, oral expression, or written expression, because remember, this is about difficulty with language, spoken or written. So those are some categories of specific learning disability. And then we have math, right? There's also specific learning disabilities in math. So students can have specific learning disabilities related to mathematics because, after all, mathematics is still language-based. A disability in math calculation impacts a student's ability to perform basic math operations like addition, subtraction, all that good stuff. And then they are probably those kids that are struggling with math facts and using the standard algorithm or performing that written or mental computation. Whereas a math problem solving disability impacts a student differently. It impacts their ability to solve real world scenarios, word problems. They might have difficulty understanding what a math problem is asking them to do and choosing the appropriate strategies, organizing steps. Like they can compute, but they're not making sense of math problems. So essentially the ability to make that sense and persevere in solving them, which is, you know, I just want to emphasize like this is what we think of when we think of the habits of math, right? So making sense of problems, reasoning abstractly, constructing viable arguments and testing them, being able to model with mathematics and use appropriate tools strategically. These are the habits we want to build in our students in math, and especially for higher level math. So I say all of this and break down specific learning disabilities because I've heard just in conversation, right, asking teachers, well, what disability does this student have? And they say, well, he's SLD. And they don't know SLD in what, right? And they can't tell me how being SLD, having a specific learning disability, I mean, like specific learning disabilities in the name, but they don't know the specific learning disability and they can't speak to how it impacts a student in the classroom. If they do, it's vague and anecdotal, but not grounded in a real understanding of why that student qualified for an IEP in the first place. We can do the same thing with autism spectrum disorder, right? We can help teachers understand that autism spectrum disorder, right, is a developmental disability that affects the areas of, if you can just click through these, Rachel, verbal and nonverbal communication, social behavior or interaction, responses to changes in routine or environment, and then responding to internal and external sensory or stimuli, right? So when we think about the pieces of that definition and really pull them apart, it gives us four areas where we could say, you know, typically a student with autism is going to have difficulty in one or more of these four areas, right? That's why they got identified as being a student on the autism spectrum in school. And these are four common areas that we see that disability manifest itself. And so these are our starting points for thinking about specially designed instruction and the changes in the environment or the instructional routines that the student might need to experience to be more successful, right? We may have to support that verbal or nonverbal communication. We may have to teach that student content adaptation, right? Social behavior or interactions that other students don't need to learn. The next one we're going to talk about is other health impairment. It's another like SLD, right? It encompasses so many things. When you think about students with a health impairment, right, it can affect them physically, cognitively. It can affect their strength, their stamina, their vitality, their alertness. And here are all the ways that that might show up in school, right? They might experience fatigue, weakness, reduced energy, pain or discomfort, other physical symptoms of their health impairment, of their diagnosis. They may have cognitive difficulty, concentrating, paying attention, sustaining concentration. Attendance, right? Students with health related absences or tardiness may miss instruction, and we may need to adapt in light of that. And then social emotional, right? Students who are experiencing chronic health problems have increased stress, anxiety, fear, worry, embarrassment, or decreased self-esteem. And so again, going back to thinking about what content might this student need to learn as a result of their disability, it might be ways to deal with the social and emotional impact of their health impairment. So I want you to think about, how does knowing more about a student's disability help a teacher start to make better decisions about SDI? How does breaking down what autism is or what a health impairment is help teachers? I'd like you to use the chat and just kind of think through that a little bit. Vance, you said the deficit. Teachers are often only aware of the disability. Do you mean that they can only sort of name broadly, like, oh, this student has autism? And that's kind of where the conversation ends. I'm curious for you to say more about that. And Ellen said it provides a better understanding of the barriers. Right, because oh, and Sherry, better understanding of how a student may learn best. It can help determine or target the actual academic deficits to drive the instructional needs. Yes, academic or functional impact, right? Functional deficits that the student may experience. A lot of the stuff that we just talked about on the screen was like outside of academics, right? Especially when you're talking about other health impairment or autism. Obviously, they're going to impact the student's academic performance, but they're functional needs that the student has, right? To sustain attention or to be able to have enough energy to participate in an activity are functional limitations, often unaware of the specific deficits. Okay, great. Yes. When I think about this and I talk to leaders about like, this is why it's important to engage teachers in training on disability, because teachers need to have some places to start to investigate and talk through those particular rule in or out the academic or functional needs that they need to start addressing, right? It can feel overwhelming to say this student has autism. And so therefore we have to change everything about how they experience school. No, like there are four big categories we should start with to investigate. It helps ground us in a conversation about those disability related needs and push us away from the generic needs that we might be addressing through just differentiation, right? When we have this vocabulary, we more deeply understand it. We're not just going to talk about like, oh, he's an auditory learner or like, oh, he likes science. We're going to say, well, what is it about his disability that we need to adjust our instruction to? So when I think about like headline, right, understanding a student's disability related needs allows teachers to actually do the designing that can address the stuff that stems from being a student with a disability and not just being a student in fourth grade who struggles with math. There are lots of students in fourth grade who struggle with math. Not all of them have a math computation disability. And so when a student has that, he or she needs something different than just good teaching, which is often what we hear people, well, SDI is just good teaching. No, it's something a little bit more specific than just that.
Awesome. So we're going to try to make this even more concrete. So on our screen here with his blue backpack, we have Edward. Say hi to Edward. Hey, Edward. Edward has a specific learning disability in reading comprehension. Data tells us he can read text fluently and decode accurately. However, he has difficulty identifying the main idea and selecting the most important details in grade level nonfiction text. His IEP goals reflect this. After independently reading a grade level nonfiction passage, he will use strategies to select the most appropriate main idea. That's what he's working on. All right, so we're thinking through how can we integrate SDI into a lesson to meet Edward's needs. All right, so thinking about the lesson, here's the lesson context. Students are reading an informational text about the Great Depression. They will independently respond to questions and complete a paragraph identifying the main idea and supporting details. The objective is grade level aligned. Determine the main idea and support it with evidence. So the question becomes, how do we design the lesson so Edward can access this objective? All right, so we're going to pause and give you a minute to think independently. How can we design the lesson so Edward can access this objective?
Remembering that he has a specific learning disability in reading comprehension, right? So he can decode text. He's not like struggling to sound out words, and he can read with sufficient fluency. So remembering that also tells me as a teacher what not to change, right?
All right, so let's see. All right, so this is what we came up with. This is how we saw SEI could be integrated across the three components for Edward. So when we think about content, we might narrow the focus of the passage or pre-identify key sections. We might explicitly teach how to summarize informational paragraphs before asking him to identify the main idea. When we think about how we may adapt the methodology, we might use modeling or explicit instruction, provide additional sentence frames, maybe breaking the text into smaller sections to identify key ideas before synthesizing, using structured strategies to identify the main idea. In delivery, we might adjust the timing, providing targeted small group instruction within the classroom, offering additional guided practice before independent work, or reinforcing the skill during other instructional blocks. So these are just some ideas. We wouldn't have to do them all. But one thing I want you to notice that is important is we didn't change the standard and the task remains aligned. What changes is how we support Edward's access to the task.
Can we pause right? Can you go back though? The other thing we didn't change is we didn't just go, oh, he needs an easier passage to read, right? If I'm a teacher, if I'm a gen ed teacher and I know Edward struggles with reading, my very first instinct might be change what he reads, give him an easier passage, right? If I think, oh, he has a specific learning disability in reading, well, what specific disability is it, right? I may notice that he doesn't get the right answers, but especially if I'm a middle or high school teacher, I may not have never ever listened to Edward read to know this is not an issue with like the lexile level of the text right now. He can decode and he has sufficient fluency. I need to support his comprehension. When I know he's a student with a specific learning disability in reading comprehension, I provide different support to him than I do when I just think of him as a kid who's a struggling reader. The level of specificity that I have as a teacher informs what I do change and what I don't change about my instruction. And also just changing the passage that he reads is just barely skimming the surface for SDI, right? It's barely, it says nothing about what the instruction I'm going to provide as the teacher is.
And so we said this at the beginning of the session, but SDI does not require changing everything. Adapting just one component is still SDI. So though we had a few different hypothetical suggestions of what we could do for Edward, just doing one is also SDI. So we're going to do something really fun again here now. We're going to do a little scenario practice, all right? So we're going to go through a few scenarios, and for each one, it's going to be your job to decide, using our beautiful poll feature, which instructional move best reflects SDI. And so remembering, is it addressing the impact of the disability? Is it changing content, methodology, or delivery? Is it intentionally removing a barrier? Is it maintaining access to grade level learning and rigor to the greatest extent possible? All right, so here we go. Our first scenario is Aaliyah. Aaliyah is a third grade student with autism spectrum disorder. The impact of this disability, she has difficulty with pragmatic language during collaborative tasks. She struggles to participate in partner discussions. When asked to work with a partner, she has difficulty initiating conversations. She may even disengage. So when you think about the anticipated barrier, Aaliyah has difficulty initiating conversations, staying on topic during partner work, sometimes doesn't take turns or engage in off-topic discussions. We want to implement SDI into our lesson to support Aaliyah. Which instructional move best reflects SDI? All right, so option A, assign Aaliyah to work independently instead of with a partner. Option B, provide a visual discussion script with sentence starters and model expected partner interactions. Option C, allow Aaliyah to choose her partner. Or option D, remind Aaliyah of the expectations before releasing her to work. All right, so we'll give you all a moment to think and process which instructional move best reflects SDI.
Maybe think about this, like what would be the strongest kind of SDI? If you walked into a classroom and you saw this happening for Aaliyah, you would go, oh, they're giving her the SDI that she needs. As opposed to, oh, they're differentiating for students broadly. Okay, I'm going to give us 10 more seconds. Get your last vote in. Forever hold your peace. 3, 2, 1. Let's see what folks said. Okay. Provide a visual discussion script. So option B, let's just talk through that really briefly, right? So let me stop sharing the poll and we'll talk through what's on this slide. So providing a visual discussion script and modeling those interactions. We are changing what we are teaching Aaliyah. We are explicitly teaching her how to do that discussion, right? How to turn take, how to model, like we're modeling those interactions. So we're changing what not every student needs, especially if Aaliyah is what did we say she is, a third grader? Let's say this is the end of the year. By the end of the year, we've explain to students what we expect of them when they engage in peer discussion. Aaliyah may need that explicitly taught to her for a long time, right? Not every student's going to need all of that forever. Aaliyah may need it for a long time. And the how, right? We're supporting her by giving her a process that not every student is engaging with, a visual discussion script. Assigning her different independent work just removes the task, right? So we're not maintaining that access to the general ed curriculum, we're removing it. Allowing her a choice of partner is a great option. It's a great option for differentiation. It's a great way to give kids choice in a lesson. It's not the SDI that Aaliyah needs. Would she benefit from it? Sure, maybe. D, reminding her of the expectations. Now, we could eventually get there. And, in a while after she's been explicitly taught how to do this, we've given her some tools that she could access and use. We'd love to be in a place where D works for her. We provided the SDI, and now we just need to remind her to use her strategies. But she's not there yet, probably. And they're insufficient on their own. Want to try another one?
Yeah. All right. Scenario 2. Let's look at Jordan. So Jordan is a 7th grade student with ADHD. He has difficulty sustaining attention during extended writing task and doing task completion. He has a learning task given to him in which he is being asked to have a 40-minute independent writing task. We can anticipate the barrier that Jordan has difficulty persisting on the task and sustaining attention after about 10 to 15 minutes. His work is often unfinished. All right, so which instructional move is most appropriate for Jordan? A, allow Jordan to complete the assignment at home. B, break the task into shorter chunks with planned check-ins and verbal goal setting. C, reduce the length of the writing assignment. Or D, provide a fidget tool during the lesson. He does have ADHD.
Okay, I'm gonna end the poll in 3, 2, and 1. Oh, we got one last minute vote in. Okay, let's see where we are. Okay, let's talk through these options and talk about which one is the strongest here for us. So if we allow Jordan to complete it at home, completing work at home might reduce the student's fatigue or might address the reduced fatigue in class, but it doesn't necessarily allow Jordan to build strategies or help him actually like sustain his attention during instruction. It might be a last resort because we don't want to penalize Jordan for having ADHD. And if he needs extended time, we can find ways to do that. B, we said was the strongest one, right? Breaking the task into chunks is a proactive way to say, we know that this is probably how this is going to show up for Jordan, right? So let's not create a situation where he needs to complete it at home. Let's chunk this. Let's do it into structured segments. Let's change the delivery of our instruction to support the fact that we know his ability to sustain attention and task completion is limited by his disability. Reducing the assignment length, again, could work, might improve his ability to complete it, but doesn't necessarily build his endurance and ability to sustain attention long term. And it may reduce the rigor, right? If the goal is that for in his grade level that he can produce a piece of writing that's X amount long and do it by comparing two texts, like if we shorten that assignment, we're not building towards grade level proficiency. We're just he's going to stall out, right? That's all he's going to be able to do. And then D, providing a fidget tool, again, helpful support, maybe a great accommodation, but on their own, it's probably not going to help most students be able to sustain attention. And it's not necessarily specially designed instruction if we just, again, give a kid a tool and don't teach them when and how to use it. Now, if Jordan eventually knows there are fidget tools in the back of the room, and as he's getting close to that end of that chunked work time, he can go grab one to just help him concentrate longer, that would be great. Jennifer, can you help me better understand how this is SDI versus accommodations? I think of SDI as what the teacher is doing instructionally. That is that, yes. Back to our checklist, right? If it is something that the teacher is doing and changing about the lesson versus something that we're telling a student, you can just go off and do this thing, grab a calculator, right? Calculators and accommodation, teaching a student when and how to use a calculator is the SDI. A lot of times I tell people when you think about accommodation versus SDI, if there is an accommodation that you want a student to eventually, when they're becoming an adult learner, know that they need to advocate for themselves, know when they need to use it and when they don't need to use it, right? That's going to require us to explicitly teach the student how, when, and to monitor whether something is an effective strategy and tool for them. So there's a piece of that, like what the teacher does, that has to be in there. It's not just about handing tools to kids and saying, hope this helps.
All right, we have one more scenario before we end our session for today. We are going to take a look at Devin, our sixth grade student with an intellectual disability. So his IEP is focused on comprehension of key ideas and participating in grade level discussions. He's been given a lesson in social studies to analyze primary source documents, and the teacher can anticipate the barrier that the reading level and density of the primary source text may make it difficult for Devin to independently extract his ideas, which limits his participation in discussion. So that teacher is thinking through, what do we know from the IEP? How will that apply to the lesson at hand? So another again, and you all are doing great. What is the most appropriate SDI decision for Devin? Is it A, to replace the primary source with a simplified summary? B, pre-teach key vocabulary and concepts using visuals and guided questions, then support Devin in accessing selected excerpts of the original text? C, exempt Devin from the document analysis and assign an alternative activity? Or D, allow Devin to listen to the text, read aloud without additional supports? What is the most appropriate SDI decision?
Sorry, I didn't realize I was still sharing poll results. It kept not letting me launch the quiz. There we go. There's Devin. Okay, I'm gonna close our poll in 5 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Let me share the results.
You all got this.
Yeah. So back to what we were talking about earlier, right? Like thinking about whenever the option presents itself to replace something, right? Or eliminate the task or assign an alternative task. It should be like at least a pink flag in our minds that like, oh, we might not be doing SDI. We might be making a modification. We might be accommodating if we're talking about giving a student a tool without teaching them how to use it or supporting them and thinking through whether or not that tool is actually working for them. So when I see words like pre-teach, um, planned questioning, going back to the last one, like those describe what the teacher is doing. And so that to me is always kind of like a green flag for, oh, that's probably SDI. If we're identifying what a teacher is teaching or changing about how they're teaching the student, it's probably SDI, especially if I can trace it back to a disability related need for someone like Devin.
Awesome. All right, so as we close, I want to anchor us in this, and we hope this is one of your key takeaways, that strong SDI decisions are grounded in three things. First, deep knowledge of the student, not just the label. We need to know their strengths, their data, their patterns, their learning profile. Second, a clear understanding of how the disability impacts access and progress in the general education curriculum. Woo! Not just their label. Not just assumptions, not just generalizations, but specific student data. And third, a commitment to increasing access to the general education curriculum and progress toward meeting grade level standards. So it's not about lowering expectations, it's about designing for access. And so we hope that you can walk away, screenshot, put this on the back of your phone. But before we let you go, we do want to hear one more word that comes to mind now when you think about implementing specially designed instruction. All right, so take a moment and you can type, and drop your word in 3, 2, 1, go. Ooh, yes, intentionality, access, delivery, planning. Pre-teach, Vance. I like that one. That's a good one too.
Yeah, I often like to tell people, like, when you think about SDI, one of the first sort of gates to pass through is like, is there any additional content I might need to pre-teach the student because of their disability? Is it a social skill? Is it additional content? Previous content?
Also, we do want to just remind you that we do have a third session on SDI, and this one we're super excited for. It's about leading school-wide systems that support SDI. So how can we put the conditions in place as a building to support our teachers in providing SDI and build toward those leadership system level decisions? And so we'd love to see you there. We will be emailing out the link and we'll drop it in the chat. If you haven't registered, please do. And before you go, we do have a quick survey. If you don't mind scanning that QR code, I'll also drop it in the chat. We would love your feedback so we can continue to make our sessions meaningful for you all. And we thank you for joining us. So I'm going to drop the link to our partner experience survey in the chat. And in just a moment, Krista will drop the link to register for our third session on SDI.
It's in there. It's a real long link. You can't miss it. I don't know why it's so long.
Oh, yeah. I see it now.
Yeah, if you're not signed up for the third session, that's the long link. And then our survey, tell us about this session. It's right there. If you have additional questions, the survey is a great place to ask them. Great place to let us know if there's any follow-up that we can give you. Oh, I realized we didn't talk about the difference between intervention and SDI, but we're going to do that. I forget who asked that. Who said that earlier? Look back through the chat.
I think the registration link is for today's session that you dropped in.
That might be true. Let me see if I can find it.
But Jennifer, we're glad that you're registering. We're excited to see you again.
I'm on it.
We appreciate that. We appreciate that. We are getting that link.
Yeah. Got it. It's another long one, but here she comes. Copy. And I'm forgetting who it was that mentioned that should be the one for the March one.
Yep, so that session will be March 22nd, same time, same Zoom accounts. And we'll see you then. Feel free to hang back if you have any
It says March 19th, Rachel.
Yes, that's the right one.
Is that the right?
Yeah.
Not the 22nd. Okay.
It's March 19th.
I'm sorry. Yes, 19th. Not Sunday. Okay.
We love our job. Welcome, Joanne. Thanks for joining us. If the person is still on the line that asked about intervention or that talked about intervention versus SDI and you want to chat through it, we'll stick around for a couple more minutes, but I cannot find it. I'm looking through the chat and I just cannot find it. So. My apologies. I'm trying. I wish there was a search the chat function. There's just
I'm gonna find it.
We'll definitely talk about it in March because I think that's one of those big questions for leaders for sure. Okay, I'm gonna close the room. Thank you guys for being here. We'll see you in March, hopefully.